After leaving the gate, he was hopelessly lost. Happily, the magic remained strong and steady, pointing him toward a rougher section of the city. A few people were already out and moving around, unshaven, dressed in leathers, and generally looking less than prosperous. The locals eyed him with suspicion. Maddox eyed them right back with disdain. As long as they stayed out of his way, Maddox didn't care what they thought of him. In the end, no one troubled him, and he soon found himself standing outside a large apartment building. As he was trying to figure out exactly which unit Alazad called home, a pair of grubby workers hurried past him. Looked like the second floor. He went inside, found the flight of stairs, and climbed up. Down a short hall around a bed, and he found his tracking spell pointing right at a closed door. Smiling to himself at the ease of his success, Maddox hammered on the door. When he got no response, he hammered on it again. This time a muttered response was followed by stomping footsteps. When the door jerked open, he found himself face to face with a pale, overweight man in a gray robe. His long goatee was sprinkled with crumbs, and short hair with a receding hairline covered his head. Looking rougher than usual, Brother Alazad, Maddox said. Alazad blinked at him as if not fully believing what he was seeing. Elgin, what are you doing here? Perhaps we should discuss it inside. Though from the smell emerging from the apartment, Maddox wasn't certain he wanted to enter. Right. Alazad moved aside, and Maddox took a reluctant step through the door. Old meals and other filth covered every surface in the sitting room. Maddox's lip curled in disgust. Alazad had never been known for his fastidiousness, but this was vile. Did Morgoth send you to help me? I swear I'm doing everything I can to find the urn, but even gaining access to the castle is virtually impossible. I've tried all sorts of magic, but the castle is well warded. Frankly, I'm at my wits' end. The end of Alazad's wits was a short trip at Eve. Relax. You're not in trouble. A great deal has happened since you left on your mission. Is there anywhere less disgusting we might try? Alazad whirled his hands around, and the ether responded, sweeping the trash up in a whirlwind and depositing it in the corner of the apartment. The chairs were now reasonably clean, and the two men sat facing each other. Maddox gave him a condensed update and concluded, at midnight, Morgoth is going to wipe out the city. Then we can just walk in and claim the urn. What are the odds of anyone noticing the ethereal market I put it up now? Alazad just stared stupidly at him, clearly overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Maddox snapped his fingers right under the man's nose. Hey, focus. Right, sorry. It's just a lot to take in. I waited till sunset to cast your spell just to be safe. There are a few wizards among the city guards, and it is possible one of them might come by on patrol and see something. That's fine. What are the odds of me getting a cup of tea and something to eat? Or, I was planning to go to the market today. Is Serena really dead? Maddox ground his teeth. He'd gone longer than this without food plenty of times. Once more would have done, though it would put him in an even worse mood than usual. According to Morgoth, she can keep Luca company in asteroids hell. I've heard nothing from him, though I assume he's still searching for the alchemist's village. So you're the only one to complete your mission. I suppose congratulations are in order. I do have wine, which you like at last to celebrate our coming victory. Maddox shook his head. Wine on an empty stomach wasn't a good idea. Neither was spending a day in Alazad's company, but he survived. It was only until midnight after all. What could go wrong? Barrett Boyd hurried down the stairs with his friend Tobias on his heels. They'd lucked into temporary work at a warehouse loading and unloading wagons. The coin wasn't great, but at least it allowed them to contribute something in exchange for staying with Elias. The former ranger insisted it wasn't necessary, but Barrett hated the idea of being dead weight. Not to mention, sitting around day in and day out with nothing to do bored him to tears. Not that his new career was overly entertaining, but at least it got him out of the apartment. At the bottom of the stairs, he made a right and headed for the street exit. Barrett had barely emerged when he was forced to dodge around a figure in a gray robe. He didn't get a good look, but Barrett would never forget that bald-headed goatee. The man they just passed was the bastard that wanted to kill them before he settled for erasing their memories. Barrett made sure not to give away any sign that he recognized the wizard, hurrying away until he found an alley to duck into. "What are you doing, Barrett?" Tobias asked. "We're already late." "We're going to be later. That was one of the wizards we just passed." Tobias's eyes widened. "One of the ones that killed Dawson?" "Yup. We're going to see where he goes and tell Elias so he can get a bunch of guards together to arrest him." "I thought Harper was going to deal with him." "Looks like that didn't work out. Though his buddy is missing, maybe Harper got him and this one escaped. Don't matter much right now." Barrett looked around the corner in time to watch the wizard enter their apartment building. "Come on. This is a really bad idea, Barrett." He couldn't argue with that, but if the wizard was here, it meant trouble. "Stay here then. I won't be long." Tobias grabbed his arm, but Barrett pulled away and marched back the way he'd come. Not rushing or hurt, just like a man that forgot his lunch or something and had to return home. Inside, he paused and listened. There were footsteps on the stairs to the second floor. No one else had entered, so it had to be the wizard. Wherever he was going, it was on the second floor. That was enough detail for Barrett. He wanted to know exactly where the wizard was going a good deal less than he wanted to risk getting caught. He nearly leapt out of his skin when Tobias put a hand on his shoulder. "I got nervous. You just shortened my life by a year. Get me to the second floor. We can tell Elias and he can have the guards search the entire floor. No need for us to get any closer." Tobias nodded eagerly with that, just as Barrett knew he would. Neither of them wanted anything to do with those wizards, and only Barrett's fear of what he might be up to convinced him to do this much. They made the turn to the apartment they shared with Elias. Barrett pushed the door open and found Elias smoothing his uniform. The former ranger looked from Barrett to Tobias and back. "Did you guys forget something?" "Worse," Barrett said. "We passed one of the wizards that killed Dawson. He's here, in this building, somewhere on the second floor." Elias's jaw dropped a fraction. "You're absolutely certain?" "I'm not likely to forget that son of a bitch's face anytime soon." It was him. Why he's here I couldn't tell you, but you can be sure it's not for anything good. Shit. At least I'm working with Octavia today, so if I run a little late, she won't give me any grief. Elias ran a hand through his close cropped hair. "Okay, I'm going to talk to the local guard commander. I don't know him personally, but during our previous encounters, he struck me as a competent professional. At a bare minimum, he'll send someone to investigate." Barrett nodded. "Make sure he knows to send plenty of people. Half a dozen guards won't last long against the wizard. Guess we'll head to work." Elias shook his head. "Don't. Go to the plowman. I've got a sick feeling and I've learned to trust him. If everything goes to hell, we'll meet up there." "Fine with me," Barrett said. He felt bad about just ditching work, but in the end it made little enough difference. "Be careful. Don't worry about me. As soon as I make my report, I'm headed for the castle. I want to talk to Octavia, and hopefully I can get word to Jackson as well. Frantic willing, we'll all meet you at the plowman after my shift. What we can do about the current situation is another matter altogether." Elias hurried out and Barrett followed at a more sedate pace. "Is this okay?" Tobias asked. "If nothing happens, we'll be out of a job. If the worst thing that happens today is us losing jobs we hate, I'll consider that a victory. Deep down, Barrett knew there was no possibility he'd get that luck. Chapter 11. The city was coming to life as Elias made his way toward the district guardhouse. Workers of all sorts were emerging from their homes to make the trek to their place of employment, all of them blissfully unaware of the danger that had arrived in the city. Elias envied them their ignorance. Were it within his power, he'd have happily forgotten everything Barrett had told him. He swallowed a lungful of cold morning air. No, that was a lie. Much as he hated the mess he found himself in, it was better to at least have some hope of making a difference. Whether that hope came to anything or not was a different matter. Turning down a seldom used street, Elias was nearly run over by a squad of guards jogging at high speed away from their guardhouse. He stared at their backs. Nothing was burning, and no one was screaming. So what the hell could have motivated them to move that quickly? The city guards had many good qualities, but an excess of ambition usually wasn't one of them. Offering a silent prayer to Brannick that some other, even greater threat hadn't appeared in the city, he continued on to the guardhouse, a two-story building nearly as sturdy as a fort. There was no line of people outside waiting to complain about some minor disagreement. That was a bad sign. The complainers would be there unless the guards told them off, and they seldom did so since it pissed off the locals who assumed, rightly, that the guards were there to listen to them complain. He crossed the street and pushed through the unlocked doors into a large open area with a half-wall blocking access. A single guard sat behind it, his fat face ruddy and covered in sweat. He took one look at Elias and bared his teeth. "We're in the middle of an emergency here. Come back tomorrow." "I have something important to report," Elias said. "I'm a soldier assigned to the castle armory. This is serious." "From the castle, you say?" The guard's attitude softened a fraction. If there was one thing that always got people's attention, it was mention of his employer. "Let's hear it." "I spotted a dangerous wizard in my neighborhood. He's responsible for at least one death and likely more. What his business is in Montague City, I can't say, but I am certain it's not good." "A wizard? Does he have a black skull anywhere?" The guard on duty had gone from vaguely dismissive to all ears. Did Barrett mention something like that during one of their many conversations? Elias was pretty sure. "That's right. He's holed up in a second-floor apartment in my building. I'm not sure which one, since I didn't want to move too close and get caught." The guard turned toward the rear of the building. Elias forgot. "Commander, we've got a lead." One of the closed doors along the back wall slammed open, and a burly man in a uniform not that dissimilar to Elias's quick marched to the front of the room. "This fellow saw a wizard carrying an amulet that matched the description sent by the castle." "Where and when?" the guard commander asked. Elias repeated everything Barrett had told him. "I didn't follow him to see exactly which unit he went to, but it's on the second floor." "How do you know he's a wizard?" Elias explained about the attack and murder of Dawson. When he finished, the commander narrowed his eyes. "So you're only repeating what you heard. You're not a first-hand witness." "As a soldier, I assumed I'd have a better chance of getting the news to someone quickly. My friend is a good man, but as common as they come." "And you imagined that him being a commoner would affect how we treated him?" Elias swallowed a laugh. "Are you saying it wouldn't have?" The commander's lips peeled back in a little snarl, but he couldn't say it. "No, much as I wish it were otherwise. Give us your address and we'll check it out. Orders from the castle make this our top priority." Elias did so, then added, "I'm on my way to the castle now. I'll spread the word and hopefully get you some extra help just in case." "Much obliged. But I think we can handle one man, wizard or not." "I pray to Brannick that you're right. He murdered my commanding officer, and I'd be most pleased to see him hanged for it. Elias offered a salute and hurried out of the guardhouse. He'd taken care of part of his duty. Now to get to the armory and find Octavia. It took a little longer to reach the castle today since he was coming by an unfamiliar route, but soon enough the gate guards were waving him through. Both of them looked tense, their faces pale and the eyes dark. Clearly whatever order had the guards on edge had been given to the castle soldiers as well. Elias wanted details, but had yet to run into anyone either able or willing to offer them. Crunching across the snow to the armory, he passed dozens of soldiers running here and there, all of them armed despite being on the ground and not at a post. The chaos was making him wish for a sword of his own, even though he had no idea who he might use it on. The massive armory doors were wide open, and people were busy scurrying around the many suits of giant armor. It looked like when the princes had their duel, only all the suits were getting attended to, not just a pair. Chief Reed was overseeing things himself. Since this was his day off, that couldn't be a good sign. Keeping his distance, Elias looked around and soon spotted Octavia standing beside a marked pool. She was staring at its chest, though why was unclear to him. No doubt the answer involved magic. He strode over, making sure to stomp his boots so he wouldn't take her completely by surprise. He was a few strides away when she turned to face him. Her smile made her otherwise plain face light up. Maybe no one would agree, but she was beautiful to him. "You're late." She looked around and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. "It's been a crazy morning." "You're telling me. Is there somewhere we can talk? Some things have happened that you need to know about." "No. Ian's on the warpath and I need to finish checking this unit's power crystal. Orders came down to be ready for full deployment at a moment's notice." "Can you listen and check at the same time? I really need your advice." "Sure. Stand behind the unit's right leg and I'll block you the best I can." Her gaze shifted back to the suit of armor. Elias moved to stand where she'd sat and laid out everything that had happened since he spoke with Barrow. "Anyway, whatever's going on has the guards in an uproar. That crazy wizard being in the city has me nervous, and I have no idea what I should do about it." "Word is the High Priest of Brannick received an oracle last night. There's a dark force headed for the city tonight, and someone with a black skull amulet is mixed up in it. I'll wager copper to platinum that's your wizard. Maybe we'll get lucky, and the guards will grab him and end the threat. And I say maybe because if the problem was that easily fixed, I doubt an archangel would have gotten directly involved." Nothing Octavia just said did anything to make Elias feel better about the situation. "What should I do?" "I don't know that there's anything you can do. When we're finished for the day, we can go to the plowman together and try and come up with a plan. Other than that, just help out however you can for now." Elias was afraid she was going to say that, but there was nothing for it. With no better option, he got to work. Chapter 12. A desperate and disgusting search through Alazad's kitchen turned up a legal-free biscuit and half a smoked sausage. It said something about how hungry Maddox was that this struck him as an edible breakfast. A quick slice of his dagger removed the chewed-on end of the sausage, and he dug in. Halfway through the biscuit, Maddox heard the clunk of boots outside. Sounded like a lot of boots. Maddox closed his eyes and extended his sight out through the door. Around the bend, he found a force of 20 heavily armed men in guard uniforms. One of them stared right at Maddox's construct. They had a wizard with them. Great. There was no way they were here by coincidence. Shit. He released the spell and quickly polished off his breakfast. He was going to need all his strength. "Alazad!" A rumbling snore greeted his shout. The fat idiot had fallen asleep in his chair. Grumbling to himself, Maddox stalked into the living room and kicked the chair over, occupant and all. Alazad sputtered and stared up at him. What's the big idea? Guards are coming, and they've got at least one wizard with them. Alizad scrambled to his feet. Well, how could they have found this place? How should I know? We need to get ready for a fight, assuming you don't want to surrender. That wouldn't end well for us. Alizad stood and turned toward the apartment's sole bedroom. Let me grab my satchel and I'll be set. Do you have a plan? Kill the guards and find an inn to hold up in until midnight. Alizad nodded. Works for me. It took only seconds for Alizad to return, a heavy leather satchel over his shoulder. During those brief moments, the thud of boots grew louder. The wizard that spotted his construct must have noticed the thread connecting it to his eyes. His spying had been right here. Oh well, Maddox had never been one to shy away from a fight. I'll leave. You finish off any stragglers. No survivors. We don't want to be tracked. I'm not an idiot, Elgin, and this isn't my first fight. Right. I'm used to dealing with Luca, so you'll have to make allowances. The thud stopped right out front. Come out with! Maddox conjured a fist of pure ether and slammed it into the door, blowing it out into the hall and the guards outside. Threads shot out and lightning followed. Screams and the stink of seared flesh filled the air. Maddox stepped into the hall and kicked the thrashing guard in the head with all his might, crushing the man's skull. Smoke rose from still twitching bodies. There was no way it would be over that quickly. The thought barely entered his mind when a targeting thread shot out at him from around the corner of the hall. He blew it away and countered with more lightning. The wall exploded, sending jagged shards of wood flying. Behind him, Alizad was busy finishing off the surviving guards. Is there another way out of here? Maddox asked. What about killing them all? We're too exposed here. They're using the building as a shield, and I can't see them to accurately attack. Maddox smashed another incoming threat. If that was the best the enemy wizard could do, Maddox wasn't worried. At least he wasn't until half a dozen more guards came charging around the corner. When he tried to attack, the guard wizard stepped into view and blocked Maddox's targeting threats. Fine, if that's the way he wanted it. Maddox blew a hole in the floor directly in front of the charging guards. One of whom fell into it. 7 of Maddox's targeting threads shot out, and this time 3 got through. He shifted the power from the blocked threads and used it to blast the 3 guards he reached, killing 2 instantly and sending another twitching to the floor. Fall back, the guard wizard shouted. Not waiting for the survivors, he disappeared around the bend in the hall. Flames shot over Maddox's head as Alizad struck down the guards attempting to flee. When the roar faded, Maddox ran after the fleeing wizard, careful to keep his vision shifted to the ether lest he walk into a trap. At the corner, he peeked around and found nothing but an empty passage. If his quick count was right, there was 1 guard unaccounted for. Maddox would have bet a great deal that the missing man was on his way to collect reinforcements right now. What now? Alizad asked. I doubt running away and hiding will work. He was right, damn thing. And if they didn't have a secure spot to hide, Maddox couldn't conjure the ethereal marker he needed to keep out the wraiths. Where did you leave your ghouls? Maddox asked. At the bottom of a pond in a park outside the city. Why? Hiding here isn't going to work. That means we need to get out of the city and collect reinforcements of our own. Morgoth is attacking here, so even without the barrier, we should be safe outside the walls. Those weren't his orders, Alizad said. His orders were to make contact and get somewhere safe. Morgoth said nothing specific about staying in the city. And even if he did, I have no interest in fighting however many guards and soldiers the powers that be plan to send against us. I could kill scores, but even that wouldn't make a dent in their numbers. Good point. I came from the west and that's where the park is. Northgate is the nearest exit. Let's head there and swing around. Alizad took the lead and Maddox was happy to let him. He had to know the city better after all. At the bottom of the steps, Alizad paused and glanced out the door. Uh-oh. What? Maddox brushed him aside and looked out. Dozens of guards were pouring into the area, while one man waved at the apartment building. From the ethereal glow around his body, that meant to be the wizard. Or worse, another one. No chance of getting out that way. Where's the back wall? Maddox asked. This way. Alazad led him down another empty hall. A little ways ahead, a door opened, and a woman stuck her head. She took one look at Maddox and Alazad before slamming the door shut again. It heartened him to know that there were still sensible people in the world. Alazad stopped and pointed at a blank section of wall. This is it, but there's no door on this side of the building. Good. Hopefully they'll think they don't need to guard this side. Maddox conjured an ethereal circle and set it to spinning, adding power as he did. When it touched the wall, it sliced a perfect disc out of it. No guards were visible outside. An invisibility spell settled around Maddox and Alazad, and he led the way out. Alazad had sense enough not to speak, as voices coming from nowhere would kind of defeat the point of being invisible. On the other hand, he didn't want to get separated either. Lead the way, take your time, Maddox whispered. Ahead of him, Alazad was distinguishable as a faint, ethereal glow. That was the downside of an invisibility spell. Unless you went to a lot of extra trouble, it only hid you from people that couldn't see you either. That was most people. But when you were being hunted by wizards, most wasn't necessarily good enough. No shouts rang out as they jogged through the busy streets. The locals paid them no attention, going about their business in blissful ignorance. One advantage of operating in a city was the abundance of potential hostages, assuming the guards were willing to risk 2 wizards going free to save a single person. That seemed like a long shot to Maddox. Alazad came to a stop, and Maddox grimaced. What the hell was the problem? He stepped around the bigger man for a look, and frowned. The gate was closed, and it looked like at least 50 guards were standing in front. A closer study revealed at least 2 glowing in the ether. 2 wizards backed up by 50 guards was a big task even for them. Maddox felt reasonably confident that they could beat them. But even if they did, they'd be so exhausted, even ordinary soldiers would have no trouble taking them down. Can we get up on the battlements? Maddox asked. There are stairs, but they'll be guarded. Hopefully not this time. Let's go. Alazad turned and started down an alley that led away from the main road. A cat hissed as they passed, probably able to smell them even if it couldn't see them. Maddox ignored it and kept his senses peeled for pursuit. There was no way someone hadn't figured out how they escaped by now. Any second, he expected angry armed men to come running up their backs. By some miracle, they reached a heavy-duty set of stairs that led up to the battlements before their hunters found them. A squad of 10 guards blocked access, but there was no wizard to see. Perfect. I can take 7, Maddox said. Can you get the other 3? We'll use iron vine
just fit over there.
throats. I want to do this as quietly as
You can set it in my chair. Thank you.
Of course I can take 3 of them. What sort of weakling do you take me for? Alazad sounded genuinely offended, not that Maddox cared. We've never worked together, he pointed out. How am I supposed to know your capabilities? I guess that's right. Say when. Maddox gathered power and ran it through his iron ring. Now! Their threads shot out, and the guards went rigid. Maddox drew his dagger and hurried over. 7 threads was close to his max, and he didn't want to hold the spells any longer than necessary. Fortunately for him, cutting a throat didn't take long, and soon all 10 men were bleeding out on the cobblestones. He took a moment to catch his breath, then started up the stairs. They creaked and clunked so loudly that he nearly released his invisibility spell. The guards on patrol would have to be deaf not to hear them. And sure enough, at the top he spotted 4 men, swords drawn, looking everywhere for the source of the noise. Maddox didn't even have a chance to act before Alazad hit them all with binding spells. He was turning out to be so much more useful than Luca that Maddox felt a little bad about comparing them. After pausing long enough to finish off the guards, Maddox leapt over the battlements. Rapidly rotated ether slowed his fall, and he landed easily at the base of the wall. Alazar joined him a moment later, and they set out for the distant woods. They only made it about 30 strides when someone shouted, "There they are! Fire!" Arrows arced in, landing all around them, but none getting especially close. A wizard must have shown up and spotted them. That being the case, invisibility was less valuable than a shield, and Maddox altered his magic appropriately. The rain of arrows instantly became more accurate, though no more dangerous than a spring rain. More unintelligible shouts came from the wall, but he ignored them. A few more minutes and he would be out of range. "Ah!" Alazar stumbled beside him, an arrow jutting from his back. Maddox grabbed his arm to keep him from collapsing. Not so much because he cared what happened to Alazar, as because he didn't know exactly where to find the ghouls. There was no doubt in his mind that more soldiers would be coming, and when they did, he was going to need more than his magic to fend them off. "How bad is it?" Maddox asked. "Very rough," Alazar growled. "We must have found a thin spot in my shield." "How far to the park?" "We need to swing right, but first let's get to the tree line and away from the Astaroth cursed arrows." The barrage had pretty much stopped at this point, but Maddox chose not to argue. He would be happy to get out of sight at least. Maybe they'd luck out and lose the guards. He snorted at his own foolishness. Given how many of their fellows Maddox had killed, there was no way they'd just give up. When they passed between the first row of trees, Alazar groaned and grabbed the trunk of a spruce. "Pull it out. I've got enough power to seal the wound." Maddox probed the arrowhead, and as he'd feared, they were far. It took little enough effort to bend back the barbs and push the flesh away from the metal. Well, it took little effort on his part. From the noises Alazar was making, the procedure was taking a toll. After half a minute of adjusting, Maddox pulled the arrow out. "There, you're all set." Alazar snorted at that, and soon an ethereal glow formed around the rather ugly gash in his upper back. As far as Maddox could tell, the arrow hadn't gone in deep enough to hit anything vital, but it had to hurt like hell. While his temporary partner worked, Maddox took a peek back at the city with his extended sight. No sign of pursuit yet. That was a small comfort. "I'm done. Let's find the ghouls so I can rest." Maddox liked that plan. When he turned back, he found Alazar had stitched his wound shut with ethereal thread. It was an interesting technique, one Maddox had never seen before. He just hoped it didn't split open when Alazar fell asleep, or more likely passed out. The two men set out with Alazar in the lead. The walking was easy in the little patch of woods, and they made good time, finally emerging in a park that was basically a pond surrounded by a patch of grass. Alazar slumped to the ground, his back to a fair-sized maple. "They're in the pond." Looked like controlling the undead would fall to him. That suited Maddox fine. Given the option, he would always choose to be in control. Pulling the black iron amulet out from under his robe, he channeled ether into it, then sent his will into the water. Soon enough, a dozen dripping humanoid figures emerged and stalked toward him. They were all lesser ghouls, unfortunately, but even so, they'd be a match for 3 times as many ordinary humans. He ordered them to form a defensive perimeter around the park, then sat beside Alazar. Just a matter of waiting now. Maddox took the speaking sphere Wargog. They reached the entry hall just as a shadowy shape moved through. The creature, one of the raised jackdaw serpent, slashed its claws through the torso of the right-hand guard. The man collapsed, his body rigid, his face pale, and his eyes open and staring at nothing. His partner on the left ran the wraith through with the spear. The undead flew right up the shaft like an enraged boar and killed the second guard as easily as it did the first. With a roar, Lockwood charged. His movements were sharp, and his enchanted sword a blur as he slashed the wraith half a dozen times in a second. One of the blows must have hit its core, as the wraith dissolved into black smoke. If the wraiths have made it this far, the city must be in shambles. Marshall took a knee and made the sign of the inverted sword over the dead guard as he mumbled a prayer. A faint white glow surrounded both of them, and Marshall bowed his head. Jack strode between his father and Marshall and shoved the double doors open. Beyond the outer wall, the city looked completely dark. He squinted. There were a few lights out there, but nowhere near as many as there should be. Jack didn't like to think about what that meant for people. His father briefly squeezed his shoulder before leading the group to the right toward the armory. The sun sword glowed in his hand, shedding enough light to make the walking easier. If the magical engineers were still in the castle, that was where they'd be. Behind him, Jack heard Lochner ask, "Why did you bless those men?" "To keep them from rising as undead themselves. Their bodies have now been purified by Brennan's grace, and no human magic will be able to defile them." That was good. But given how many people lived in the city, the priests were going to be awfully busy if they planned to bless everyone's body. The group rounded the bend that led to the armory just in time to see a bolt of lightning flash through the night. Looked like at least one of the wizards was still here. A wraith darted into the light as if out of nowhere. Father cut it down before Jack even had time to react. Unlike his and Lochner's swords, the sun sword only needed to make contact with the wraiths to destroy them. Pity they didn't have a dozen of the wondrous weapons. Father stopped 10 strides from the armory, and he made a defensive circle. "Hello! If anyone's alive in there, show yourself at once." A rather nervous-looking fellow in a blue robe poked his head through the armory door. "Majesty?" "Chief Reed," Finn bright. "Are the other magical engineers with you?" Father asked. "No. It's been a long day. We finally completed all the preparations for activating the magical armor. I sent them home to rest." Father growled. "That is not what I was hoping to hear. Are you alone?" "Yes, Majesty. The Red Knights are deployed throughout the city. They have enough power in their crystals to operate with it. May I ask what's going on?" "Long story, Thomas. We are on our way to the Temple of the Dragon. Come along, and I'll fill you in the way." Chief Reed emerged fully from the armory, an iron rod clutched in his hand. He hurried over, and the group, now one larger, headed for the main castle gate. As they walked, Father told the chief how things stood. Jack had heard it all many times, but hated it. Instead, he kept his head on a swivel as he searched for red eyes or movement of any sort. "How many more lightning bolts can we manage?" Lochner asked. "3, maybe 4 by this backlash," Chief Reed said. "Preparing an army to get out. I'll be back to full strength after engagements." If they saw another day, Jack figured they'd be doing good. Getting a chance to rest seemed far too optimistic. When they reached the gate, the portcullis was already up. The guards on duty, unfortunately, were lying on the ground, stiff as boards, their faces twisted in horror. Jack would be happy to never see that expression again. Marshall paused long enough to offer a quick prayer to purify their bodies. Then they were on the move again. On the main street that led to the temple, bodies of soldiers lay unmoving on either side. The many patrols that usually kept the area safe had accomplished nothing beyond feeding the graves. Jack did his best not to look too closely at the dead. "How will Montague come?" Lochner asked. "Our ancestors survived close," Father said. "They made it through, and so will we. One day at a time, one monster at a time. We will reclaim our city and avenge our people." Father sounded as grim and determined as Jack had ever heard him. If he could somehow summon half his father's willpower, Jack would be doing well, and he would find it out. The people wouldn't just look to Father for leadership. Jack and Lochner would have to step up as well. By some miracle, the group reached Brennan's temple without encountering any more of the wraiths. Jack allowed himself to hope that they weren't that many of them. A few dozen wouldn't be so hard to deal with. A few thousand of them would be a serious problem. Marshall pounded on the temple door. Open up quickly! A moment later, a warrior of male in a black tabard bearing Braddock's sword hit the door open. Lord Marsh, I think Braddock was something. Come inside. The priests have done something to keep the monsters away, and survivors have been arriving in small groups. No one knows what to tell them or what to do. Marshall strode through first, then Father reached Jack and Rockland in the center. Jack had barely taken a step when a moan of pain made him spin back around, just in time to watch Father collapse, a dark wall protruding from his stomach. No! Jack lunged, grabbed the sun's sword, and slashed it through the wraith. An instant later, Rockland was at his side, and together they pulled Father into the temple. Marshall knelt beside him and placed his hand over Father's back. He's still alive, but only just. The sun sword must have offered some protection from the wraith's life-draining touch. Let's get him to one of the healing rooms. Is he going to make it? Rockland asked. I don't know. The fact that he survived the wraith's touch in the first place is a miracle in itself. I'll do all I can. But I thought the other priests did something to keep the wraiths away, Jack said. The rage burning in his heart nearly overwhelmed him. The ward only protects the temple. Your father is still outside when he was struck. Marshall made a complex motion with his hands, and the golden cocoon formed around Father. Save your energy and your wrath for the people actually responsible for what happened. Jack took a slow, deep breath and tried to center himself like Father had been teaching him. Marshall was right, of course. The lesser priests weren't responsible for sending these monsters into the city, and they were all doing their best to keep the temple safe. Jack could hardly go around screaming at them. I'll get his chest, Rockland said. You get his legs. Jack nodded, and together they carried their father to an empty room with a simple cot and stool as the only furniture. They laid him down, and Marshall sat beside the cot. This is going to take a little while, Marshall said. You two can wait outside. It was less a request and more of an order. Jack couldn't stand looking at Father like this anyway, and was happy to obey. In the hall outside, they found Chief Reed pacing and chewing on his thumb. Immediately hurried over to Jack. It's His Majesty. Father still lives, and Marshall is doing all he can to keep it that way. We need to figure out what we're going to do once he finishes. I'm far from an expert on magic, but I assume the priests can't maintain their sport forever. Certainly not, Chief Reed said. Priestly magic is different than the sort of magic wizards use. But even so, the risk of backlash from overuse remains the same. How many other priests are there? 5, Martin said. Jack glanced at his brother and raised the eyebrow. I've been training with priests, remember? I've met everyone. Please don't ask me to name them all. 5 priests showed me. Chief Reed tapped his chin. I'd say sometime after midnight their power will run out. That's just a guess, Mr. Jack nodded. Midnight wasn't that far away, and if Father hadn't recovered, everyone would be looking to him for leadership. The thought made his throat froze up in his face. He wasn't ready. Rockland let him on the shoulder. We're in this together. I'll help however I can. Some of the pressure in Jack's chest went away. Having his brother at his side, hoping it would be enough to get them all in this mess alive. Chapter 20. Eric swallowed the carnage on display as they walked down the silent street. He stopped counting the bodies 3 blocks away. There seemed to be more. He didn't know how many people called Montana City home, but he suspected far too few of them were going to survive the night. None of the little group had spoken for less than 2 years, saying the Indian seemed disrespectful to him. He felt a glance behind him, the line of people strung out behind the rise. There hadn't been a raid for time for 2 blocks. He had no idea if the creatures had learned to fear Octavia and Archie. Somehow he assumed that the idea of fear was a foreign one.
This taller purple is a mix of beastly brown from Vallejo, Dead White from Vallejo, and Royal Purple from Vallejo. And I mixed that up, and I added water with Dawn dish soap. I did three drops of Dawn dish soap in my water. That helps it drop into the blocks the surface tension, so it will flow better. These two are glaze. I used Vallejo glaze medium with flat red, and Vallejo glaze medium with the mix. And I'm glazing here, anywhere around the bumps. I started glazing, and I'm glazing around the tentacles and stuff. I'm going to continue doing that. But I just started to see what it looked like. I'm glazing here around the tentacles.
They all lead to the same destination. Leaving the fallen armor behind, Elias turned right and stopped crossing. 10 rays floated directly in front of him. The glowing red eyes focused on Elias and his light. Barrett tried to swallow. How are we going to clear around this much? Octavia, Elias asked, before stopped. Suggestions. She moved to the front of the line to join them. After a moment, she asked, why don't we just clear there? 10 of them could overrun us in seconds. The question had to be rhetorical, since if she didn't know, none of them would. I have no idea, Elias answered. But I'd like to get out of here before they decide to do something other than clutches. Is there another way around? Elias stared at her. We'll need to backtrack and block and take a different side street. Whatever they were going to do, Barrett wished they'd get on with it. He felt like a sitting duck out there in the middle of the street. Finally, Elias edged away from the race and led the group back the way they'd come. It didn't take long to reach the previous side street. Unfortunately, they found the road blocked by 10 more raids. The same 10, or 10 new ones, if he wasn't sure. He also thought it didn't matter. What the hell is going on? The American crouched. Barrett was wondering exactly that, and from the looks on their faces, so were Elias and Octavia. We best think of something quick before people totally panic and just start running. It's like they're trying to hurt us somewhere, Tobias said. Agreed, Elias said. It's the where and why that concerns me. Is there any chance we can fight past them? Octavia shook her head. You've got 2 shots left. Even if they light up for me, that's not enough to destroy them. For now, I think we need to play along. Barrett didn't like that plan in the least, and it seemed he wasn't the only one. One of the men broke from the group, William. It didn't take long for him to vanish into the night, the moment after Barrett lost sight of him. That tone screamed right out. As if he needed confirmation of what happened, a pair of red eyes appeared in the darkness. The threat was clear and unmistakable. Run and die. You all something, Tobias muttered. Much as he wanted to reassure his friend, Barrett was forced to admit that he was probably right. No one else took the chance to run, and soon the group was moving. At the next intersection, the raids once again waited to block them. That continued for 3 more blocks before finally a side street opened up. Elias ignored it and kept going straight. This time, the raids appeared in front. Right. No denying it now. They were definitely being hurried towards something. Elias turned back and took the side street. I'm not familiar with this part of the city, Octavia said. Where are we? The merchant section, he said. Mostly businesses and warehouses. Why the hell would they want us here? No one had an answer for that. Elias turned right and walked about 50 feet before more raids appeared in their path. The undead shifted, creating a wall that ran to a warehouse that had an open front door. place wasn't all that different from the one where Barrett and Tobias wrote the sign for looking a bit bigger. If the inside was the same, it would be nothing but a sprawling, open space filled with crates and boxes. Sure enough, they found exactly that inside. But that wasn't all they found. There was also a group of people sitting or standing near the center of the warehouse. There had to be a publisher. It didn't take a genius to figure out where the race wanted them, so Elias marched right over to the group. Everyone looked up at their bench, most apathetically. A haggard-looking woman, a torn smock and stained apron, separated herself from the group and hobbled over. From the way she favored her right side, Barrett assumed she'd either hurt herself or was suffering from arthritis. "They got you folks too, huh?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Elias said. "I don't suppose you have any clue why they held us here." "Can't say as I do. My group was making its way to the Temple of the Goddess in the hope of finding shelter. I can't guess how many blocks we passed on our way. When them things appeared in front of us, I figured that was it. But they didn't attack. Instead, they blocked every path save the one they wanted us to take. We finally ended up here, heading much wrong. You all know the fourth group you were on. That matches what happened to us, Elias said. I suppose our only choice, at least for now, is to sit here and wait to see what they plan to do with us. We won't have to wait too long, Octavia said. Groups can't function in daylight. Whatever's going to happen, it will likely happen before then. This was one time Barrett wouldn't have minded what they had to do. Chapter 21. The streets of Vallejo City were silent and empty, everything save corpses. Maddox strode along the main street behind Wargoff. Salazar brought up the rear, complaining bitterly about his doing for each step. Maddox seriously debated if he wanted to shut him up. If they ever found anyone living, he might just do that. And the honor guard of 10 rates surrounded him. They could barely make them out against the darkness. They looked like concentrated figures of corruption, outlined by a dark purple aura in his magical vision. He didn't know exactly what that aura meant, and wasn't eager to expose his ignorance by asking for details. As long as they obeyed Morgoth, nothing else mattered to him. The city is largely secure, Morgoth said, so there's no need to be nervous. What does largely secure mean? I was honest. There are a few prophets holding out against my witness, but it's only a matter of time before the ones protecting those locations run out of stamina. As well as the main areas of resistance are the temples. Priestly magic is highly effective if we until the world. The castle is fully suppressed, so we can proceed there and retrieve the third urn and new copy. Then, Maddox says, have you gotten word from Nurgle about the alchemist's location? No, but I have one for us. Morgoth didn't even look back as he spoke, and it went faster. After a few blocks, Maddox finally asked, do you intend to share the plan with the rest of us? If you like. I ordered the raids to spare the princes. If your capital city was destroyed, your father killed, and your kingdom threatened by an unknown enemy, where would you go? The dukes? I was unpopular. Morgoth snorted. Their troops would be of no more use against my raids than your lucky fellows killing the city. What the new king needs is magical help, and given this kingdom a shortage of prisoners, there is only one place to complete it. The alchemists. The raids will harass them, force them to be moved, giving them too much time to think. One prophet the beast will guide us straight to the hidden village. And if they don't, Maddox asked, more to give Morgoth a hard time than because the prophet was wrong. Given all combined talents and heart, and away from the found and It was about a 10-minute walk to the castle, and true to Wargoth's claim, no one attempted to stop them. In fact, Maddox didn't so much as sense anything living within his magical range. Though hardly one could be troubled by death, he tried to imagine how many people had been killed in this one night, and failed to come up with an answer. Thousands, certainly. The main gates stood open as he approached the castle. Maddox's gaze shifted down the street when he sensed a powerful, magical energy source, and for life energy came beyond. That's the Temple of Breath, Wargoth said. It's where I let the rulers escape to. There are a few stragglers that need it as well, but they'll serve a valuable purpose, putting pressure on the inexperienced prince. They'll be eager to pick up someone sick, and should only heighten his desires to reach the outposts. You've got it all figured out, Maddox said. You had a good deal of time to think when you were playing hide and seek with the rope and constabulary. Wargoth got far when he looked in his eyes. It's strange. Since I woke up, I've been in control of things. I find my mind has been clearer than ever. But all the doubts and hesitations that have plagued my entire life have been washed away in the motion of darkness. It's a glorious feeling, one I wish I could share with you. Maddox would be just as happy to avoid having a brain messed with by a bunch of undead. Thanks, but don't promise anything. Any idea where we can find him? That last question was directly at Malazar, but he just shook his head. Well, I never heard anything about it during my research attempts. Well, I only managed to speak to the servants, but none of them had ever seen anything even resembling the mithril bird. Probably surprising. Wargoth pulled a black bundle out of his satchel and offered it to Maddox. I knew I had trouble finding it before I left our backup place. Opened it. Maddox did so, and found the lid to one of the urns that had already opened inside. He smiled. Resonance magic. There's nothing right. I'll do it myself. But since my awakening, in addition to my new clarity of thought, I also found my sensitive to direct contact with mithril. Wargoth popped his neck, a little frown playing around his lips. It's almost like I've been partially transformed into an undead myself. Yet I still need to sleep every night. My body still is weird, and my capacity for manipulating the ether hasn't changed. It's all over. Hopefully the apprentice can explain everything once we find his head. That seemed optimistic to Maddox, but well, as long as Wargoth wasn't going insane, he didn't care what sort of weird changes were happening to them. Putting their leader's patience out of his mind, Maddox sent a thread of ether into the mithril room. When it emerged, he activated the resonance spell and sent it into the castle to find any other mithril that might be lying around. Given how rare the metal was, it shouldn't take long to work with the room. At first, the thread tried to pull him to the night, but that was it. That way leads to the armory. If any of the suits of magical armor did make it out, that's probably what your spell is detecting. Finally, a peaceful calm from Malazar. Maddox adjusted his spell so that it would ignore anything outside the main key. That done, he headed straight for the front door. Just like the wall gate, this one was wide open. A few feet inside, he found the bodies of the men that were no doubt charged with defending it. Regular old steel weapons and armor really were useless, though this lot didn't even have time to draw their swords before the raids killed them. A little tug on the thread pulled him down the hall to the right. Letting the magic guide him, Maddox focused only on the spell. As a bonus, that helped him ignore the many bodies he was forced to step in. A number of twists and turns made him they were standing in front of the first closed door into the counter. There's something mithril behind that door, Maddox said. Allow me. Wargoth pondered and feeling the grip and sliced the door off its hinges. It fell into the room beyond with a horrible crash. The noise sounded especially loud given how silent everything had been until then. Maddox stepped forward, glanced at the fine furniture and decorations, and promptly dismissed them from his thoughts. Where was the mithril? thread tugged him toward the rightmost bookcase. It was covered with expensive-looking leather-bound books, but nothing that looked like the other. Sharpening his awareness, Maddox pointed in taller. Not on the bookcase, though. Behind him. He grabbed the sideboard, yanked, and stepped aside as the bookcase tumbled down. The wall behind it was smooth, but the magic didn't lie. Something was hidden. What's the problem? Warlock asked. The spell says it's here, but it's something different. I'm guessing there must be a hidden compartment or something. Warlock lashed out with his ethereal grip, slicing the wall to ribbons until he exposed the edge of a niche built into it. A few yanks on the ruined wood revealed him, covered in dust, but otherwise looking exactly like the one Maddox and the Luca found at the ruined tower. Maddox released a spell and pulled the urn out of its niche. He got it. Do we return to base and look at it? Warlock shook his head. You can't leave the armor. We need to drive the princes toward the Alchemist's village. Once we deal with them, we can return with both urns and open them at the same time. Maddox nodded. That was a reasonable enough. So what now? Now, the wars of the temple can't last much longer. Once they fall, I'll build the brass into action. Come on. I haven't eaten a proper meal in nearly a day. I'm going to the kitchen. Given everything he'd seen, Maddox wasn't especially hungry, but he knew he'd need his full strength before things were settled. And damn, he was going to get killed now that they were so close to victory. Chapter 22. Jack paced, fretted, then paced some more. Lucky for the temple that they had no carpets in their halls, or Jack would have worn a hole in them by now. How long had Marshall been working on Father anyway? He totally lost track as his mind flitted from one horrible outcome to the next. On a bench to one side of the door, Lachlan sat with his head resting against the stone, eyes closed, and looking far too calm given their current circumstances. Jack was considerably jealous. How are you so relaxed? Jack finally asked. Lachlan opened one eye and looked at me. I'm not, but everything in me says we're facing the longest night of our lives, and I want to get one less than that. You should do the same. He was right, but just the thought of trying to sit still right now sent a shudder down Jack's spine. The pacing was barely helping him keep it together as it was. Before he could explain that to his brother, the door opened and Marshall stepped out. He looked haggard, and dark ridges had formed under his eyes. Jack couldn't take that as a good sign. Is he still alive? Marshall said. Though Brannick alone knows how. The Wraith drained almost all of his life force. Half a second longer, they would have killed him. Their quick action certainly saved his life. That didn't make Jack feel bad, but he appreciated Marshall trying. Can I see him? Yes, but he's unconscious, probably unaware that anyone's there. Have you two got anything for me? I doubt I can keep anything down, Jack said. You should try. I'll have one of the servants bring something for the two of you. In a couple hours, we're going to have to make our move, and you'll want all your strength when the time comes. What move? Lachlan asked. We need to leave the temple, collect as many survivors as possible, and flee the city. That's crazy, Jack said. There's no way we can fight off the Wraiths with the few weapons we have that are capable of hurting them. Marshall offered his warm, reassuring smile. You're not going to fight them at all. You're going to use the sun sword to create a solar barrier. Everyone inside it will be safe from the Wraiths, and it will last until sunrise. As Marshall spoke, Jack's anxiety grew with every word. You realize I've never successfully tapped into any of the sword's greater powers, right? I've barely managed to fully connect with it. Marshall clapped him on the shoulder. Don't worry. You'd be amazed what people can do when properly motivated. Jack didn't buy that for a second, but before he could voice his concerns, Marshall turned and strode down the hall out of sight. Lachlan stood and opened the door to the living room. Let's see how Father's doing. You can worry some more after that. Thanks. The brothers stood on either side of the cot that held their father and stared down at him. The rise and fall of his chest was barely noticeable, and his skin held the color of melted ice. He looked for all the world like a dying man, despite the time Marshall spent calling on Brannan's power. Heaven's mercy. Thanks that he should be resting, not resting on a cot. Marshall muttered the words, but Jack caught them in. He didn't disagree either. Father looked even worse than Mother had the day before she died. It was generally the fate of children that watched their parents die. But Jack had hoped to avoid that grim reality for a few more decades at least. But seeing Marshall's power, we actually can call on the sword's power. Where are we going to go? The undead are relentless and immortal. Eventually I won't be able to answer the bell, and then we're all dead. I've got an idea about it. The only way we'll be safe is if we destroy the race. And the only way we can do that is with magic. Remember the alchemists' representatives that visited last spring? Jack nodded. They wore those funny orange robes. Without them. They've got more magic than anyone else in the kingdom. I say we go find them and ask for help. Jack scratched his chin. It wasn't a bad idea. We had no idea where the village was. Do you know where to find them? No. Father said it's something he'd tell us when the time was right. But the Dukes all know how to find the village. If we have to, we can go to Duke Huxley and have him guide us. His castle is the closest, right? Yeah. Assuming the wraiths don't meet us there. Jack dearly wanted to find something. I hate having to rely on someone else. So many things could go wrong. Anyway, we should talk about it. He might have even better idea. Agreed. I just figured any plan was better than no plan. Jack grinned and nodded. It isn't that. I feel at least a little better now. A servant brought soup and bread, and Jack found he was hungry. After they ate, Jack sat on the stool beside his father while Lachlan leaned against the wall. Being there didn't really accomplish anything, but it wasn't like they had somewhere else to be, and Jack felt better about staying close at hand should the worst happen. A few hours passed in silence before the door opened. Marshall stepped inside, followed by a pair of burly warriors, one of whom carried a rolled-up stretcher. Is it time? Jack asked. Getting close. We've got about half an hour before the boards fall. I wanted to give you some time to connect to the sword. Thanks. Jack didn't add that he probably needed every second to do it. We had an idea for our next move. He explained about the alchemists, and Marshall nodded. I've been thinking that very thing myself. And don't worry about Duke Hudson. I know the way to the village. All the high priests do. Why didn't Father tell us? Marshall asked. It's not just a matter of knowing. The alchemists also give you a potion that allows you to pass through the illusion that protects their village. Without that, it doesn't matter what you know. As to why you are given the potion, Nicholas said, the alchemists decide who the secret is shared with, not the king. Jack frowned. Isn't that strange? Somewhat. But according to the histories I've read, when the alchemists showed up looking for a place to call home, they were fierce in their determination to retain as much independence as possible. The king at the time, who were many times great grandfather, was eager to have them settle here and granted most of their requests. He did require them to agree to a mutual defense pact. They're bound to help against anything that threatens the kingdom, just as we are bound to help Shiglavian trouble. So they're more of an autonomous enclave than a proper kingdom village. That's an excellent point.
Right now I'm glazing. I'm glazing up all of these up to a purple brighter, or a brighter purple. I'm going to make all these bruises. That's the end goal. I'm using glazing medium with the purple I made.
his satchel. What's that? Alazar asked. A toy Wargoth took from his dead master. It lets us send messages back and forth. I figured that best let him know what's happening. Maybe he can move the attack up to sunset. Maddox charged the sphere and said, Mission compromised. Forced to flee the city. Pulled up in a park about a mile away. The sphere did its thing, and Maddox pocketed it. Now all they had to do was wait.
Cancel letter protection is more breathable. So you can say yes to being unstoppable. Upgrade to the kind of protection that works as hard as usual. Depend. The only thing stronger than us is you.
Chapter 13. Marshall stood, hands clasped behind his back, and listened as a guard commander gave his report to the king. They'd set up a command post in the throne room that featured a table with a detailed map of the city. There were a number of markers scattered around it, none of which told Marshall anything useful. For his part, King Irving was listening to the droning report with a stone-faced expression. It wasn't the guard's fault they couldn't find the person with the skull amulet. Tens of thousands of people called Montague City home. Finding one person was like finding a particular needle in a stack of needles. He glanced at one of the windows. Mid-morning had come and gone. It felt like their time was running out far too quickly. Despite his most fervent prayers, Brannick hadn't seen fit to offer Marshall any more details about the coming darkness. His master's unwillingness to provide more help frustrated Marshall to no end. But he couldn't exactly argue with an archangel. And that concludes my report, the guard commander said. The king leaned forward, his lips set in a grim line. That was an awful lot of words to tell me we've made no progress. The unlucky fellow opened his mouth as if he wanted to argue. But in the end, what could he say? He actually hadn't made any progress. The throne room door burst open and another man in a green and black guard uniform came racing in. Majesty, we've made contact with the pair of wizards. The person that gave us the tip said that one of them was wearing a skull amulet. The king leapt to his feet. Where are they now? Fleeing through the northern residential section. The last report I received indicates that they already wiped out one guard patrol save for the wizard and one messenger. Reinforcements have been dispatched. Take whatever forces you need, the king said. But I want those wizards alive if at all possible. We need more information about whatever this threat is, and they're the only ones that can give it to us. The guard saluted. As you command, Majesty. When both guardsmen had left the throne room, the king turned to Marshall. Are these two the threat Brannick warned you about? Marshall shook his head. I don't know. If one of them truly has the skull amulet, then I must assume they are at least involved. What we don't know is if there are any others around with such an item. If the guards can take them alive, it would be a huge help. It seems we shall have to hope they all do their jobs. Morgoth lounged under a tree, his eyes partway closed. Anyone that saw him might think he was napping, but the truth was, he had his consciousness divided between his body and the wraiths that even now slept in the earth. Maybe sleep was the wrong word. They were fully aware of what was happening. He felt their eagerness to attack the city. He shared that eagerness, though for different reasons. The wraiths wanted to devour the life force of the many humans living there, while he didn't care about the residents one way or the other. He just wanted them out of the way so he could claim the third mithril urn. Astaroth willing, that would contain the apprentice's hand. Once he had that, Morgoth could finally have a proper conversation with the man. A faint warmth in his right pocket drew his attention. It seemed Elgin had sent a message. He couldn't imagine why. All he had to do was find Alazad and wait for midnight. With a little shrug, Morgoth pulled out the sphere and extracted the message. Mission compromised. Forced to flee the city, holed up in a park about a mile away. Well, that was surprising. As far as Morgoth knew, no one in the city was looking for Elgin or Alazan. They were both far too capable to do something that would give them away to the authorities. That said, clearly something had gone wrong. More curious than worried, Morgoth sent a reply. What's happened? A few minutes later, the answer came. Uncertain. Located Alazan, then guards appeared at his apartment. Recommend moving up timetable. Stranger and stranger. Perhaps the guards had been keeping an eye on Alazan, and Elgin's arrival triggered the raid. Are you secure? For the moment, I have control of Alazan's groups. He took a wound in the escape, not serious. Morgoth chuckled at that. No doubt that Elgin's idea of Sirius and Alazan's differed a great deal. Still, it sounded like he wasn't in any danger of dying at the moment. I will attack as soon as the sun sets. Mark your position. Understood. Morgoth pocketed the orb. He'd probably never know what actually went wrong, and between him he didn't care. The others didn't need to be in the city for the attack to succeed. In fact, this was better. He could just order the raids to kill everyone without having to worry about someone on his side getting hurt by accident. The Acolytes had lost far too many numbers at the moment, and there was still a great deal that needed to be done. He smiled and returned his attention to the raids. Their cold, dark power soothed him and gave him confidence. As long as he had control of them, nothing would stand in the way of his ultimate victory. Chapter 14. Maddox was sitting under a tree not far from Alazan when he spotted the Imperial construct. It blasted the magical blast of bits, but too late for it to matter. The wizard would know where to find him now. Stretching out his will to the ghouls, he ordered them to kill anything that approached the party. Their eagerness came back to him like a flash of heat. Pushing himself to his feet, Maddox strode over and looked down at Alazan. We've been small. Not sure how long it'll take them to get here, but the guards will be coming. Are you in any shape to help? Alazan tilted his head a fraction to look up at Maddox. His face was pasty white and plastered with sweat. Far from the most appealing of specimens of the best of times, Alazan now resembled a reanimated corpse, only less reliable. When the time comes, I have no intention of being captured and questioned. Maddox seconded that idea. I'm going to head out into the woods, pick off as many as I can. The ghouls fight better when directly guided. Good hunting. Maddox turned on his heel and marched out of the clearing. For all of his talk, Maddox couldn't help wondering if Alazan would even be conscious when the soldiers arrived. If he wasn't, that would be a serious problem. Alazan knew far too much to be allowed to fall into his hands. Maddox wouldn't let that happen, no matter what he had to do. 50 yards from the park, he paused and listened. No sign of movement. At his mental command, half the ghouls came running up to him. The rest he'd leave to hunt on their own. They could do plenty of damage, even without his guidance. One of the ghouls snuffled and raised its head. Maddox still heard nothing, but the ghouls had sharper senses than he did. Sure. What? The ghoul took off at a lope, making remarkably little noise for something so stupid. Despite their limitations, the undead were excellent hunters. It wasn't long before Maddox heard the crunch of boots thrashing through the undergrowth. A lot of boots. He peered around an especially large maple trunk, and sure enough, there were at least 30 men dressed in black and green uniforms. They wore mail coats under their loose tunics, as if the armor would protect them from magic or the claws of the undead. He had no particular interest in dealing with the soldiers. His focus was on the people, especially the one man surrounded by the glow of a magical barrier. That had to be the one that spotted him. If he could take that one out, the rest of the group wouldn't last long. Big man, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The ghouls tensed, bared their fangs. As expected, they were always ready to kill. Maddox stepped out from behind the tree and sent a 7-thread lightning It burned through his weak shield in a moment, then slammed into his torso, nearly blowing him away. Now! The ghouls surged into the soldiers, snarling and slashing with their claws. To their credit, the soldiers made a decent effort at defending themselves. Unfortunately, their weapons did little beyond annoy the ghouls, and whenever they clumped up into a defensive formation, Maddox took the opportunity to lob in a fireball. In less than 5 minutes, every soldier was either burned to death or torn to pieces. A perfectly acceptable result for the first round. He let the ghouls feed and walked over to the dead wizard. Ignoring the damage his spell caused, Maddox patted the body down. Soon enough, he came up with a couple items that glowed in the ether. The first was a silver ring marked with runes, and the second was a dagger with similar markings. A bit of magical study confirmed that the ring generated the wizard's ethereal shield, and the dagger had enhanced strength and sharpness. While he hoped not to get close enough to an enemy to need the dagger, the ring would be a nice backup should anything slip through his personal shield. Grinning to himself, Maddox hoped the next group would have something even better for him to take. He, Jacob Irving, was sitting with his boys in a private dining room trying to enjoy lunch and failing miserably. Forces had been dispatched to capture the wizards that fled the city, and he was expecting news any moment. That made it difficult to enjoy his soup and rolls despite the palace chef outdoing himself as usual. His sons, on the other hand, were wolfing the food down with enthusiasm. Jacob tried to imagine what might make the boys lose their appetites, and failed to come up with anything short of death. "Where's Marshall?" Lachlan asked. "I know he showed up early this morning, but I didn't get to talk to him. I was supposed to train at the temple today." "He went back to pray to the sword lord for guidance," Jacob said. "You won't be training today." "What's going on anyway?" Jack asked. "The castle's been like a kicked hornet's nest." Both boys looked at him, and Jacob sighed. Might as well tell them now. They were apt to find out sooner or later anyway. Marshall received an oracle from Brannick about darkness that was threatening the city. It mentioned someone wearing a skull amulet and such a person. A wizard, it turned out, has been found in the city. Forces have been dispatched to capture the target. I'm waiting for news now. "Does Brannick frequently give oracles?" Lachlan asked. "This is the first one I've heard about," Jacob said. "Marshall says he's never gotten one before. I don't know if this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing or a once-in-several-centuries thing. What I do know is that if the Archangel is concerned enough to speak directly to his high priest, then the problem is serious." "That's why you ordered the army put on alert," Jack asked. "Correct. Everything that can be done is being done. If I had a better idea of what the danger was, it would be helpful, but I don't. Marshall says Brannick can't be more forthcoming. The lie is just as vague as the truth." "It's still better than being taken totally by surprise," Jack said. "Is there anything we can do to help?" Jacob offered a faint smile. If his eldest was willing to volunteer to help, maybe he was finally starting to grow up a little. "I don't know what you can do, but as soon as I do, I'll let you know. For now, stay close and don't cause any trouble." Someone knocked, and the guard outside stuck his head in. "Runner from the guards, Majesty." "Send him in." Jacob stood and turned to face the door just as a panting, red-faced soldier entered. "The first unit made contact with the target. 30 soldiers led by one of our best wizards. They were wiped out. The commander in charge is preparing a larger force to try again." Jacob slammed his fist on the table. "There are only 2 of them. How could 2 wizards kill 30 soldiers?" The messenger quailed. "I have no further details, Majesty. No witnesses survived to report back." Jacob snarled but said nothing more. It wasn't the unlucky fellow's fault. He just had the bad fortune to get the job of reporting the facts. No reply. "Keep me up to date." The messenger bowed and fled the dining room as quickly as decorum allowed. When the door had closed, Lachlan said, "Let me go out, Father. With my talent, I should be able to deal with the wizards. No, don't even think about it. If one of the princes were to be killed in battle, the hit to morale would be horrendous. We don't know nearly enough about these wizards' abilities to be sure your skills, impressive as they are, would be enough. Remember what Marshall said. Your power only activates in direct combat. A wizard might blast you before you were even within sight of him. I hate waiting here while good men are killed, Lockwood said. That is one of the greatest burdens of leadership. This is a good time for you both to learn that. Making decisions and living with the results may be the hardest thing to do. They settled back down, but even the voice couldn't hear. The silence seemed to drag on for hours, though it was only minutes before Jack said, "Permission to help the army prep? Denied. You two would just be in the way." Jacob shot his sons a hard look. "You might also get ideas about leaving the castle and going wizard hunting despite my orders. That would end badly for you." Jack looked sheepish, confirming Jacob's guess. "Your time will come, but only if you survive. Let's return to the throne room. Hopefully Marshall will return soon with good news." Jacob thought he sounded confident. If only he felt as confident as he sounded, maybe the tightness in his chest and the burning in his stomach would go away. Chapter 15. Maddox was beginning to hope that Montague's forces had given up when his ghouls started growling. Several hours had passed since he wiped out the first batch of soldiers, and noon had come and gone long ago. It was the middle of the afternoon now, and the sun was making its way toward the horizon. Maybe 2 hours remained until sunset. That seemed like no time at all, and a lifetime all at once. Closing his eyes, Maddox sent his vision flying into the forest. Unlike most wizards, he kept his ethereal construct close to the ground where it would be less likely to get spotted. Soon enough, he found the source of his ghouls' wrath. Scores of soldiers were tromping through the woods toward the park where Elazar still rested. He didn't have to do a close count to know that there were more here than even his ghouls could handle. 100 minimum. Even worse, 3 of them glowed in the ether. What he couldn't tell was whether or not they were regular wizards or magical engineers equipped with enchanted weapons. Neither was good, but the latter would be easier to deal with. Releasing his construct, Maddox pulled the communication sphere out of his pocket and charged it with ether. Overwhelming numbers of soldiers approaching my position. Send help soonest. Maddox didn't know if soonest would be in time, but at least he'd done his best. Now to thin the herd. He sent 6 ghouls around to the right flank of the approaching force with orders to hit and retreat away from the park. If he could divide their force, he might be able to wear them down in parts. Maybe. This force was at least 3 times bigger than the one he wiped out earlier. Resuming his magical observation, Maddox watched as the ghouls attacked the outermost pair of soldiers, slaughtering them in moments. As soon as the next nearest trio took a step toward them, the ghouls pulled back. Maddox snarled when an old man in the back of the line ordered the soldiers not to follow. So much for that plan. Why couldn't they have sent some young, eager-to-impress leader out to command the assault? That would have made his life so much easier. A mental command recalled the ghouls. If divide and conquer wasn't going to work, he'd have to try something else. He glanced back over his shoulder. The park was about 100 yards behind him. It wouldn't be hard to swing wide around the approaching soldiers and escape. Leaving Elazar behind didn't especially prick his conscience. As far as Maddox was concerned, all his so-called brothers were expendable. They were also useful assets, and a long way remained to go before the apprentice was freed. Throwing away someone like Luca was one thing, but Elazar was actually competent. For now, at least. He'd do his best to keep the wounded wizard alive. The ghouls he dispatched came trotting back, and he summoned the rest. 12 ghouls plus his magic. Time to see how much damage he could do. Wrapping himself in invisibility, Maddox ordered the ghouls to attack. They roared and charged while he followed more slowly. The thud of steel on flesh and the screams of the dying reached him before he saw the knots of men and undead battling. Lightning cracked as one of the wizards pointed an iron rod at a ghoul and blew a hole in its chest. Magical engineers, then. That was a small favor. Maddox hurled a fireball at the wizard, but one of his fellows smashed it apart with an ethereal whip. The third wizard targeted Maddox, but he blasted the thread apart before it could reach him. He was vaguely aware of his ghouls making quick work of the soldiers, even as their numbers slowly diminished. If it was a matter of numbers, Maddox was doomed. Time to withdraw. A 7-thread blade of ether lashed out, cutting a group of 4 soldiers in half. Using the shock to his advantage, Maddox ordered the surviving ghouls to fall back. Instead of returning directly to the park, he turned toward the city. Not that he had any intention of getting close to the walls and no doubt many archers posted there. No, he just wanted to keep them off balance and looking in the wrong place. 5 minutes of running left Maddox exhausted and panting. At least there seemed to be no sign of immediate pursuit. 9 ghouls stared at him, waiting for orders. So he lost 3. Not as bad as he'd feared, but bad enough given his lack of resources. The shadows were growing longer every second. Darkness would fall soon, and when it did, he needed to be in place and have the ethereal marker ready. The timing would be tricky. He reached for the ether, and it responded eagerly. Good. At least he wasn't getting close to backlash. If he lost the ability to use magic, Maddox was doomed. He closed his eyes and went scouting again. Peering up from ground level, he watched as the soldiers got themselves in order. The older man was talking to the wizards and pointing in the direction Maddox had run. One nodded, but another shook his head. Adding his hearing would make it that much easier for someone to spot the construct, so he decided not to risk it. As long as they were debating, they weren't chasing after him, and that was fine with Maddox. Finally, the older man pointed in the direction Maddox had gone and said something. One of the wizards saluted, and he and 50 soldiers marched off. Even that many was a problem, and even worse, the rest were getting ready to march toward the park. Alizad would have no hope against 2 wizards and 30-plus soldiers. Maddox swallowed a curse. Maybe he could draw his hunters off and circle around to hit the second unit from the back. It was the only thing he could think of anyway. He took the enchanted ring off and stuck it on one of the ghoul's fingers. Run. Lead them away from me. Don't get too far ahead and make plenty of noise. Go. The ghoul took off, thrashing through the underbrush and making enough noise for a dozen people. Maddox smiled to himself and resumed his watch over the soldiers. Just as he hoped, they rushed after the noisy ghoul. Maddox gave them half a minute, then hurried after the second group. His timing needed to be perfect. At his mental command, the ghouls remained nearly silent. That never ceased to amaze him, given how noisy they usually were, snuffling, snarling, and thrashing around. It went to show how predatory they could be. They snuck up on the rear of the group as they entered the park. Alizad remained where he was, resting against the tree, seemingly unconscious. Hopefully he was just pretending, as Maddox was counting on him striking at the correct moment. You there! The older man shouted. On your feet, slowly. Alizad didn't so much as flinch. Is he dead? The old man asked. No, sir, one of the wizards answered. His life force is strong, though he may be injured. Should we attack from here? No. Orders from the castle wall to take at least one of them alive. Looks like this will be the simpler of the 2. Move in. The soldiers formed a semicircle, swords up and ready, and started inching their way closer to Alizad. They were easily the most nervous-looking men Maddox had ever seen. When they were halfway between the wizards and Alizad, Maddox said, Now! The ghouls howled and surged forward, slamming into the soldiers from behind and cutting them down. As soon as the wizards raised their iron rods and pointed them at the ghouls, Maddox struck, hitting the nearest with a 6-thread lightning bolt that punched through his ethereal shield and blackened his chest. The second wizard spun. Alizad, with impeccable timing, chose that moment to strike, taking striking the surviving wizard square in the back and burning a hole in his chest. Grinning, Maddox used iron bind on the leader. He had a plan now. He also wanted to know how the guards even knew to look for them. A few minutes brought him to the fighting. He lost 2 more ghouls, but with Al-Azad's help, the soldiers were soon all dead. An outstanding result as far as Maddox was concerned. He called a ghoul over and pointed at the bound man. Bring him. Maddox led the way through the carnage and paused in front of Al-Azad. You did a fair job of playing dead. I was watching through an ethereal construct. I just didn't extend it beyond my head. If you do that, the magic blends in and no one can tell you away. That was cleverer than Maddox would have given Al-Azad credit for. He turned his focus on the prisoner. A slight adjustment of the spell would allow him to speak while keeping the rest of his body still. If you don't want my punitive skin off inch by inch, you will answer my questions. How did the guards know to look for us? The commander glared at Maddox, his blue eyes hard and narrow. Eat shit. Maddox scrubbed a hand across his face, just the sort of stupidly brave response he expected. Right his ear off. The ghoul's jaws snapped and he reared back, half fighting and half ripping the commander's left ear off before swallowing it whole. The man screamed as blood soaked the side of his head. Rest assured, that's the least painful thing I'm going to have it bite off. Answer my question, or we're going to find out how many bites it takes to remove your cock and balls. The commander's face went white, and not from the meager loss of blood he'd suffered so far. Maddox had used that threat before and always found it very successful. Okay, fine. Doesn't really matter anyway. An order came down from the castle telling us to be on the lookout for someone wearing a black skull amulet. A witness reported seeing me wearing one when we entered a particular apartment. We came to investigate. The magic confirmed that he was telling the truth, but Maddox knew he kept his amulet hidden at all times. That meant someone saw him, recognized him, and was aware that he wore such an amulet. He racked his brain, but couldn't think who might fit that description other than Al-Azad, who clearly would have no reason to tell anyone anything. Wait. How did anyone know to look for such a thing? I don't know. The order came from the castle, and that was enough for me. Something weird was going on, but in the end it didn't make that much difference. It would be dark soon, and then the raids would appear. Once that happened, there was no one who could stand against them. The second group is coming, Al-Azad said. Let me make you an offer, the commander said. Surrender and you'll be given a fair trial before you're beheaded. Not terribly compelling. Hold him up and put your claws to his throat. Maddox bound the man's head so he could no longer speak. The ghoul obliged, though Maddox sensed a faint disappointment that it hadn't been ordered to devour the prisoner instead. I'll handle the reinforcements, Maddox said. Can you raise the ethereal marker? Not a problem. Al-Azad wove the ether into a bright signal that any wizard worth the name within 20 miles would see. The soldiers and their wizard leader emerged from the forest and marched toward Maddox. The heavy scowls made it clear they weren't very happy to be made fools of. Take another step, Maddox said, and your commander dies. The soldiers froze, just as he hoped they would. There's no way for you to win, the last wizard said. Eventually, more of our troops will arrive and will overwhelm you. You won't overwhelm me before your commander dies. I can promise you that. In fact, I might just kill you all right now and try negotiating with the next batch of idiots your king sends. You lot are clearly too stupid to understand your situation. That was mostly a bluff. While he could probably do it, Maddox would be so exhausted afterwards he'd be lucky to remain mobile. How do you propose to end this standoff? The wizard asked. It's not like we can let you go. That certainly is a problem, Maddox agreed. What he didn't add was that he couldn't care less if the standoff was resolved as long as it lasted until dark. The wizard stared at him, and Maddox stared back, and every moment the shadows grew longer. Half an hour more, and the sun would set. Surely he could keep the fool talking that long. When the raids got here, none of them would ever talk to anyone again. Chapter 16. Marshall left the Temple of Brannick and made the short walk back to the castle. An hour of deep prayer didn't draw so much as a word from the Sword Lord. It seemed his master had said all he intended to on the matter. Disappointed, but not a huge surprise after their first conversation. Marshall hadn't been all that optimistic, but given the lack of other progress, he felt the need to try something. The sky was just turning pink and orange as the sun set. It was a pretty sight, and he let out a soft sigh. It was important to remember that no matter how bad things looked, there was still beauty in the world. Montague had survived war and invasion on more than one occasion. They would survive this as well. The guard saluted him as he entered the castle grounds and made his way to the keep. The king wouldn't be best pleased by the lack of news, but Marshall answered to Brannick, not the other way around. He could no more compel the archangel than he could the sun to not rise in the morning. As expected, he found the king and both princes together in the throne room. The silence and frowns spoke volumes about the current situation. Jacob looked up, and a moment of hope flitted across his face. Marshall hated to crush that hope, but the truth offered nothing else. "Did Brannick speak to you?" the king asked. "No. The Sword Lord remains silent despite my entreaties. Whatever happens next, it will be up to us to handle it on our own." "I feared as much. Our soldiers have run down the wizards, but the first group was wiped out. No word yet from the larger force, but I have high hopes. Surely 2 wizards wouldn't be enough to defeat 100 men." He spoke that last sentence as if begging for confirmation. Marshall wished he could offer it. Without direct knowledge of the wizard's abilities, he refused to speculate about their combat strength. "With your permission, I will remain here until the matter is settled once and for all." The king nodded. "You are most welcome, my friend." "What's holding Brannick back from being more helpful?" Lachlan asked. "It's not like anyone could threaten an archangel." Marshall smiled, but it felt hollow and empty to him. "I wish I knew. The forces of heaven are dealing with far more than our tiny problems. All I can do is trust that Brannick has his reasons, and that they are good. My wishes to the contrary are irrelevant in any case." "Our problems don't feel tiny to me," Prince Jacob said. "They certainly don't, but then we aren't immortal archangels. More's the pity." Marshall trailed off as something drew his attention. He cocked his head and focused. What was it? A few seconds passed, and he sensed a powerful source of corruption headed for the city. This had to be the darkness Brannick wanted. "It's coming." The king leapt to his feet. "You said we had until midnight." Marshall shook his head. "So I was told. Yet the corruption is coming all the same." "What is it?" the king asked. "I can't tell yet. My best guess is that it's about 2 miles out and coming fast. And if I can sense it from that far away, the corruption is tremendously strong. Whatever your plans, Majesty, I suggest you put them in play at once." The king stepped around to the map table. "Follow me, all 3 of you." He led the way out of the throne room and paused to turn to the guards. "The enemy is coming. Spread the word. I want every soldier able to fight, armed and on the wall with all haste." The guards saluted and ran as if their lives depended on it. "What now, Father?" Prince Jacob asked. "Now we go to the observation tower and get a look at what's approaching. I don't know who these madmen think they're dealing with, but they'll soon learn that Montague is not to be trifled with." Marshall dearly hoped the king was right, but the growing chill in the pit of his stomach made him fear it would be otherwise. The long, empty hall led to a tower with a spiral staircase inside. They made the climb, and at the top, King Jacob pushed the trapdoor open. As soon as he did, a chill breeze rushed down, making Marshall wish he'd worn a heavier cloak. The only thing in the observation tower was a farseer hanging from a rope tied to a nail driven into the wall. The king stopped, Marshall said. But there's a long way to go between here and there. For now, you need to get them to me. These men will carry the problem. We will be safe with us, your highnesses, the man holding the structure said. Is there somewhere I can prepare? I still can't connect with the sun sword without blowing my horns. Of course, follow me. I'll join the guards, Anthony said. I'm sure you don't need an audience. Jack definitely did not need an audience. Thanks. Keep an eye on father. Count on it. Marshall led Jack through the halls to an empty stone room. It was about 10 feet square and devoid of furniture or decorations. What is this place? Meditation room. When you close the door, it's perfectly dark inside. It frees your mind to contemplate Granite's philosophy. Marshall chuckled. It doesn't give you too much. We prefer to contemplate Granite's philosophy in the training mind. Jack grinned at that. It was such a perfectly Marshall thing to say. Let's do this. He raised the sun sword and took a deep breath. It was only at this moment that he realized he'd been holding on to the sword since he killed the wraith that struck down his father. With methodical precision, he went from position to position. As soon as his mind began to calm, he saw his father lying unconscious and had to start over again. After the third time, the struggle stopped. What's the problem? Marshall asked. It's not working. Can't turn my brain off. That's a problem. We have very little time, and you're the only one that can use the sword. I'm perfectly well aware of that fact. However, knowing it and being able to do something about it are two very different things. Sorry, sir. I didn't mean to put more pressure on you. Marshall hesitated and said, there may be another option. I hesitate to even mention it under the circumstances. I understand completely. If your fear is that I'll be offended, put it out of your mind and say what you have to say. It's less that I think you'll be offended than that there are certain risks associated with this option. Jack Harris laughed, and not because he found the situation in any way funny. Marshall, there's an army of wraiths out there waiting to kill us all. Risks are baked into the situation. If we follow your suggestion, I'm the only one in danger, right? Assuming it works, yes. Then there's no need for further discussion. What's your plan? I'll use my magic to take control of your mind, and through it, the sun sword, I can forcibly steal your racing thoughts. That sounds perfect. What are the risks? The risks are that you will be fully under my control. The magic reduces you to little more than a puppet. Marshall, if I can't trust you, who can I trust? My responsibility, no, our responsibility, is to get as many people to safety as possible. If this is the best way to do that, then let's do it. Spoken like your father. Very well. Just relax and let the magic wash over. Relaxing wasn't much easier than clearing his mind, but Jack did his best. A few seconds later, the world went blurry. He couldn't see, hear, or smell anything. It felt like he'd been fully cut off from the world. Panic was driven like a lightning bolt. Everything in Jack screamed that something was wrong. He could do nothing about it. Scream as he might in his mind, it changed nothing. Even remembering that Marshall was the one causing this issue did little to calm him. An unknown amount of time passed, and slowly Jack got used to a strange new situation. It didn't become pleasant by any stretch of the imagination, but it did grow tolerable. With no way to tell what was going on or how long it had been, Jack resigned himself to waiting and waiting. Chapter 23. With Marshall and Jacob busy, Lachlan took it upon himself to help get everyone organized and ready to move. He did this not only because it needed to be done, but to distract himself from the unmoving form of his father resting on the stretcher held by the bearers Marshall provided. Those men looked like fine fighters, as expected from guards at the Temple of Brain. He'd never sparred with either of them during his training, and neither had offered more. Some might consider that rude, but as a prince, Lachlan was used to people being nervous around him. The rest of the survivors, as well as a number of warriors and servants from the temple, were lined up behind the litter bearers. Most of the people that reached the temple arrived with nothing save the clothes on their backs. Even a handful of minor nobles looked as haggard and weary as the lowliest of commoners. The temple larder had been cleaned out and packed up. Lachlan didn't know exactly what they had by way of supplies, but he doubted it would be enough. He gave a little shake of his head. We could deal with that later should it become necessary. He found the idea of having to worry about food vastly superior to having to worry about an army of nearly unkillable undead. With everyone gathered and ready to depart, the only ones yet to join them were the priests maintaining the wall, Marshall and Jacob. A few minutes passed, and someone's kid started crying. Lachlan chewed the inside of his lip. One crying kid wasn't that good of a deal, but the longer they stood there waiting, the more nervous everyone would get. The last thing he needed was a pen. There was nowhere for anyone to go after all. A faint warmth passed through him, and a few moments later he heard footsteps. Jacob came around the corner with Marshall right behind. The sun's sword glowed with a warm, yellow light. The runes on the side shone bright, as did the gem in the hilt. All the magic distracted him. But when Lachlan looked closer at his brother, he noticed an absence of light in his eyes, and his face appeared slack and unaware. While far from an expert on magic, Lachlan recognized something wasn't right. Marshall, is all well? We'll discuss it later. Marshall's expression was tense, with poorly controlled nerves. Someone let the priests know they can release the book as soon as they join us here at evening. One of the guards jogged off deeper into the temple. Jacob still hadn't spoken a word, or even shown the awareness that Lachlan was standing right in front of him. He moved closer and waved a hand in front of Jacob's eyes. Not even a flinch. Lachlan looked at Marshall again, but the severe grimace on the high priest's face convinced him to hold his tongue for now. When they were safely away from the city, he'd be soon enough to discuss them. A few minutes passed before the guards returned with half a dozen exhausted-looking men in sweat-stained gray robes. They looked as worn out as Lachlan felt. That's everyone, Lord Marshall, the guard said. Very good. You will all need to keep close to the prince and myself. The sword's protection only extends 100 paces in every direction. If you move beyond that, you will be at the mercy of your own book. Please keep indoors to a minimum, as maintaining the barrier takes a great deal of concentration. Lachlan, be a good lad and open the front door. Lachlan led the group through the halls to the main chapel, then threw the door open, revealing the empty darkness of the street. One of the priests that had been maintaining the door took a deep breath and threw his hands into the air. A brilliant white light burst to life, revealing the corpses lying in a semicircle around the temple entrance. They must have been people attempting to reach safety, only to get cut down just short. They felt intention, cruelty for its own sake. Why such behavior from the undead should come as a surprise he couldn't say. Maybe more.
Here's what I found. I don't have an analog clock on this device.
That bothered him. Jacob led the way out with Marshall a step behind. Lachlan did his best not to look too closely at the streets as they worked their way toward the northern gate. The little he knew about the alchemists indicated that they lived in the great forest far to the northeast. It was going to be one hell of a long walk with graves guarding them the whole way. Speaking of the horrid things, Lachlan hadn't seen a single one since they left the temple. It had to be out there, but there was nary a crimson eye to be seen. Lord Marshall, one of the unoccupied priests said, I sense a large gathering of light forces not far from here. More survivors? That was an unexpected but happy bit of news. We need to get them, Lockwood said. Forget them, someone shouted from within the larger group. We need to get out of here. Lockwood glanced back, but couldn't tell who had spoken. Lucky for them. To his surprise, Marshall seemed hesitant about what to do. This isn't a request, Lockwood said. We're going to get those people. Of course we are, Marshall said. I was just thinking of the best way to go about it. Lockwood had spent a great deal of time with Marshall over the last few weeks, and this was the first time he'd ever suspected that the priest was lying to him. Even so, he kept his mouth shut, and they followed the younger priest toward the merchant district. Lockwood hadn't spent much time in the area. In fact, he tried and failed to remember the last time he visited. The bulk of the warehouses seemed to loom over them as they walked. A few raids finally made themselves seen, though they kept well away from the barrier. Finally, they reached the warehouse with an open main door, and the priest led them inside. In the middle of the floor waited a group of people, mostly adults, but he spotted a handful of kids as well. Lockwood guessed their number at over 100. It didn't take a logistical genius to know what effect another 100 mouths would have on the food supply. And it didn't matter. These people were all his responsibility. One way or the other, he would see them to safety. One of the survivors, a woman dressed in the robes of a magical engineer, approached him first. Prince Lockwood, I am so pleased to see you, Your Highness. My name is Octavia, and I serve at the castle as a magical engineer. So I guessed, Lockwood raised his voice. If everyone will gather around, we are leaving the city. There was some muttering as the people drew near. Octavia asked, how are you able to move around the city safely with all the undead about? Lockwood nodded toward his brother. The Sun Sword's magic is creating a barrier that the waves can't cross. It'll last until morning. He spoke loud enough to make sure everyone heard him, and sure enough they all hurried to join the rest of the survivors. No one said much, but there were a few resentful glares shot toward the newcomers. Lockwood made mental note to keep an eye on them. He didn't care which group they belonged to. Everyone would be treated the same no matter what. As soon as the younger priest confirmed that there were no more people around, Jacob, guided by Marshall, led the way out and toward the northern gate. This time they saw many crimson eyes watching them as they passed. But that was all the race did. The Sun Sword's magic was such that they couldn't even get close. Soon enough, they passed through the open gate and started on the long road north. Lockwood didn't know what it would take to get everyone to the Alchemist's village, but he meant to do it no matter what. Chapter 24.
The pen keeps you drier than ever, so you can say yes to more than ever. Depend. The only thing stronger than us is you.
Maddox had seldom eaten a more delicious meal than the one he prepared in the castle. Even if he was just reheating leftovers from the royal's day. The castle chef knew his business, and all the ingredients were perfectly seasoned. He also found a loaf of soft white bread that went perfectly with the roast beef. Belly full for the first time in a day, he was stretched out in a chair in the waiting area, his feet propped up on an end table. He was just debating taking a nap when Borgoff came striding in with Valazar behind him. Borgoff had a faraway look on his face, and his head cocked a bit to the left. He blinked a few times, and finally seems to notice Maddox. You look comfortable. Maddox shrugged. Why shouldn't I be? There's nothing else to be done at the moment, is there? No. Though to my surprise, our guides have located and rescued the people I captured for tomorrow night. Not a huge deal, but annoying all the same. What were you going to do with them tomorrow night? Maddox asked. Have the raids kill them, of course. Once a day has passed, we regain their ability to spawn. That bit of bad luck lost scores of new soldiers. Borgoff shrugged. But no matter, there are plenty of other people in the area. We can just visit a few farms until all the raids have killed at least one human. Maddox nodded. It was a good plan, and for a bit cold-blooded and for him. So will we part, huh? Eventually, it's not that close. You need to stay within range of the lake side. You'll rest here for the night and for day tomorrow, then pursue them after sunset. For now, I believe I'll go see how comfortable things that keeps. Rodolph left without another word. For his part, Alazar sat facing Max, his face twisted in pain. What would it cost to get you to cast the life first for me? A favor in the future, Max said without hesitation. But we need someone to provide the life first for the spell. Your animals work, there's a chicken coop out back. In this line of work, Alex seldom had a good laugh, but the idea of draining the life force from a bunch of chickens to heal Alazar had him bent double in his chair, laughing so hard tears ran down his face. He'd often heard it said that chicken soup had healing properties, so it wasn't so far-fetched. When he finally got himself under control, Alazar said, "Feel better?" "Yes, and the chickens will suffice. Life force is life force after all. Lead the way." The pair made their way through the kitchen and out a small side door that led to an open area. The clucking of chickens came from a raised square coop. Off to one side sat a block of wood about 2 feet tall with an axe driven into it. Judging by the reddish skin covering it, he doubted the cook had used it to split the pile of wood ranked up against the castle wall. Alex yanked the axe out and motioned toward the block. "I see. This will take a second." Alazar settled down with a soft groan. Maddox moved closer to the coop and gathered it. As the power grew, he sent a thread into the coop and pierced each chicken through the body. Next, the ether he gathered went out along the thread, hammering into the birds and hurting their life force free of their bodies, killing them instantly. A little tug on the thread pulled the glowing white ball of life force back to him. It really did look exactly like human life force. Strange that he'd never bothered to note that. Of course, now that he thought about it, he'd never worked directly with animal life force. Well, as long as it ended Alazar's retaliation, he'd consider the effort well worth it. And having a favor in the family, even from someone as pitiful as Alazar, was never a bad thing. The life force flowed out in his mental direction and surrounded the wound in Alazar's eye. Felt a bit like some infection, I'd say. That was rather fast. Maddox struck the infection away first, then started regrowing the muscle and skin. The whole process took about 3 minutes and used up all the life force he'd gathered. If there had been one fewer chicken, he wouldn't have been able to finish the job. Good. Opposite view. Much better. Thank you, Elder. Save your things, and remember the favor you owe me. You should rest. When you wake, the feeling will be complete. Alazar stood, nodded, and strode off the way they'd come, leaving Maddox alone in the yard. It felt like everything was finally going their way. Maddox couldn't help wondering why that thought filled him with anxiety. Chapter 25. The longest night of Lachlan's life ended when the sun finally colored the horizon red and Marshall called a halt to their march. Their campsite, such as it was, ended up being a patch of uneven ground off the main trade road. A few inches of snow covered everything, and while that was far from ideal, it certainly beat ending up in the park. He barely had time to register his relief when Jacob fell to his knees and face planted right into the ground. One look at his gluttonous face made it clear that Marshall only remained upright by the narrowest of margins. Lachlan hurried over to check on the burn. As soon as he got close, Jacob's snoring became clear. Thankfully, if he was making that much noise, he had to be okay. Turning to Marshall, he asked, "Are you two going to be all right?" Marshall smiled unnervingly. "We have. The alternative isn't very good. That said, we both need to sleep. Can you handle keeping everyone together and being one thing?" "No problem. I wish we had a tent or something. Jacob's going to get sick sleeping on the ground in the snow." The fact that he can do it at all tells me exactly how much using the sword to guard him. Is it because this is the first time he's used it for so long? I'm sure that's so. Marshal John so wide his jaw cracked. Right, I won't bother you anymore. Sleep if you can and leave everything to me. I assume we'll be moving again tonight? Marshal slumped to the ground with a sound gently. No, I wanted to put as much distance between us and the city as possible tonight. But from now on, we'll be moving during the day and the rest of the night under the sword's protection. Not having to march at the same time he's calling on the magic should be easier on your brother as well. Lachlan nodded. That all makes sense. But people would be less anxious walking during the day as well. Not to mention a full day's rest should help them recover their strength. Leaving the marshal, Lachlan went to check on the rest of the group. His first stop was fine. His bearers had set him on the ground. Both men looked as exhausted as Marshall had. Otto's condition hadn't changed. Still unconscious and still breathing. That was about all Lachlan had cared for. My thanks to both of you for carrying my father. Both guards bowed. It was our honor to do so things. When the time comes to move, we'll be ready. And until then, you may rest assured that we'll keep His Majesty safe. The guard's earnest promise eased some of Lachlan's concerns, but only for a moment. As soon as he headed for the rest of the survivors, he noticed that almost none of them had heavy weapon cloaks. That might have been okay while they were walking, but now the cold was certain to be an issue. As with his many other problems, there was nothing he could do about this one either. At least, not at the moment. The priority right now was food. No one had eaten anything since they left the city. If they could get some fires going, that would help with both the cold and cooking a meal for everyone. Lachlan spotted the temple servants with their heavy packs of supplies standing near the guards. He angled that way, but only made it partway over before a strident voice called out, Prince Lachlan, Your Highness, a moment, if you please. No commoner had ever spoken in a temple. It seemed at least one of the higher-ranking nobles still residing in Vallejo City had made it out in one piece. Lachlan couldn't decide if that was a good thing or not. Time will tell, but he had serious doubts. In an emergency, nobles seldom served to make things better. Despite his misgivings, Lachlan plastered on a half-hearted smile and adjusted his course with the tall, slim man that had spoken. He had an oiled mustache and slicked back hair, and wore a fine silk tunic and trousers of matching green. And slippers, alas, instead of boots. You called? Lachlan asked. Indeed I did. I wish to know where we are going and how you intend to keep us all safe until we arrive. What supplies we have of your quantity needed for so many people. Taking on even more commoners only makes it less likely that the rest of us will survive. Lachlan's eyes narrowed. Were you the one that called out in protest of rescuing the people we found in the warehouse? I certainly am. The decision struck me as a foolish one at the time, and nothing has changed about our situation. Survival of the fittest surely means that the highest ranking should get what they need first and foremost. And the noble's duty to the people? Our task is to serve as their guides and protectors, is it not? Under normal circumstances, yes. But our current circumstances are anything but normal. Better to cut loose all those that might be a burden than the rest of us might survive. Lachlan took a step closer and shot the man hardly. I'll keep your advice in mind should anyone come up further. If you'll excuse me, I want to see about getting breakfast for you. The arrogant face smoked. Quite right. Something hot would be most welcome. Lachlan marched away before he said something he might regret. Well, he didn't know how much he'd regret, but getting on the bad side of a noble, even a stupid one, would only make his work harder in the future. One of the few things you could count on was that they looked after their own. They would use one noble and the rest would get other. And that would lead to all sorts of problems that Father would want on his plate for people. Cursing them silently to whatever hell awaited anyone willing to sacrifice innocent people for their own survival. But nobody knows. The temple servants bowed immediately at his approach. When he straightened, Lachlan let out a soft sigh when he spotted a familiar face. Well, thank the sword lord. How much food did you get? Bran scratched his beard. Not enough, given the number of mouths we need to feed. If we limit ourselves to 2 meals a day, we should be okay for 3 days. Lachlan stared. 3 days? It'll take at least 2 weeks to reach the edge of the great forest, maybe longer. Plus, however long it'll take to get to the alchemist's village. Bran just gestured helplessly at the far 2 small packs resting on the ground in front of the servants. We found what we have on us. Much as I wish it were otherwise. Right. Sorry for that. I didn't mean to snap at you. Please see about getting some food going. I'll send someone to collect firewood and keep the state of our supplies going. I don't want people to get hurt. As you command. Given how far we've come, I'll make it a filling here. We can start cutting back tomorrow. Lachlan clapped him on the shoulder and set out to get a group together for firewood detail. He only got a few strides away when a hesitant voice said, "Beg your pardon, sir." Lachlan forced away a snarl and turned toward the speaker. A burly man in leathers that looked like he'd be more at home in the country than the city. "What can I do for you?" "I didn't mean to eavesdrop or anything. I heard what you said about the food situation. I'm a hunter by trade. If a bow or spear can be found or made, I'd be glad to see about adding some fresh meat. Granted, bless you. That's the first good thing I've heard in what seems like a long time. The bow is unlikely, but surely we can fix up a spear, even if it isn't the finest one in the room. What's your name?" "Barry. No thanks, sir." "Lachlan Nurgle, and it is excellent to meet you." Lachlan cut off his hand, and Barrett stared at it as though it might bite him. Lachlan laughed, reached out and grabbed Barrett's hand. After a few enthusiastic pumps, he released the mortifying hand. "Tell Bran I said to give you something. I'll see about that spear." "Yes, thanks." Lachlan walked away grinning. And heaven smiled. Maybe we could have venison for dinner. When Lachlan had gone to check on the rest of the survivors, Marshall flipped Jacob over on his back, summoned the last of his reserves, and passed his hand over the prince's head and chest. His life force felt strong and steady. Good. The mind control wouldn't damage the target's body itself, but the stress of being controlled did take a toll. Fortunately for them all, Jacob was young and strong. If any of them could withstand the pressures caused by the spell, he too. Marshall offered a silent prayer to Bran, and with a little more practice, Jacob would be able to command the sword himself when darkness fell. He snatched it up and brought it to his eye. His frown deepened as he swung it, slowly right, then left. "I see nothing." Marshall held out his hand. "May I, Majesty?" He accepted the farseer and peered through. It was so dark Marshall could barely make out the individual trees. A flash of red caught his eye, and he tried to follow it. Once he found it, he quickly spotted more. They were eyes, and they were floating in humanoid-shaped blobs of darkness. He counted dozens before lowering the farseer. "Bran, focus. They're rays. Dozens of them at least. Maybe hundreds." "What are rays?" Prince Jacob asked. "Undead with no physical form. Normal steel can't harm them, and the army won't slow them down. Only magic or mithril has any hope of killing them." Marshall's gaze shifted to the king's sword. "That's why Brannock said you were the only one that could stop them. Wraiths would be especially vulnerable to the Sun Sword's power." "I can't protect the entire city," King Jacob said. "The barrier only extends 100 yards at most." "Then we will just have to save as many people as possible," Lachlan said. "Can you enchant a sword for me, Marshal?" "Of course, but it's not so simple. With a basic magic sword, you'll need to cut through their core, and since you're not a wizard, you won't be able to see it. If I slash enough times, I'll hit something, Let's get to the armor. They all looked at the king, who nodded. Heaven help us. Now we have no choice but to fight.
You know, it was time to put someone in a position who cares about our conservative values, who cares about the Constitution, who cares about representing us as Christians. Be sure to offer your support to Chris.
Chapter 17. Barrett had spent some long, boring days when on the hunt, but the 10 hours he spent waiting in the plowman had to number amongst the longest. He feared sitting there, sipping ale and wondering what was going on might drive him mad. It hadn't yet, but if Elias didn't get here soon. A faint snore drew his attention to Tobias. His friend and fellow ranger had no such qualms, and had long since drunk himself unconscious. Barrett envied him. At least he no longer needed to worry about what was going to happen. Patrons had gathered as the hour grew later, and the common room was now almost half full. Smiling and laughing, eating and drinking, like they didn't have a care in the world. Ignorance, it seems, truly was bliss. A dull thud prompted him to look at the door. It was Elias and his lady friend. What was her name? Right, Octavia and Brannick. He stood and waved to them. Elias waved back, and the pair made their way through the tables to join him. The men shook hands, and Barrett added a little nod to Octavia. He didn't know her well enough to shake hands. At least he didn't feel it. He did. What news? Barrett asked. About the wizard? Nothing. The army's on full alert, and they just let us go after we finished prepping the last suit of magical armor. I don't know what they're expecting, but it must be serious given everything going on. How are you supposed to prepare if no one lets you know what sort of enemy you're fighting? Barrett asked. Even if they don't know the exact number, surely they know something. Elias shrugged. Maybe something knows something. If they do, it didn't get shared with the likes of us. Even the magical engineers are in the dark, Octavia added. Great. So what do we do? I wish I had a better answer for you. I didn't even have a chance to talk to Jackson. He got transferred to Walden. From the sound of it, they've got a man every 3 feet. Elias gave a little shake of his head. Right now, I say we have an early dinner and head home. Maybe we'll get lucky and nothing will come. And maybe pigs will learn to fly. Barrett muttered. They'd barely given their order to the serving girl when someone outside the door opened, and the woman staggered in before collapsing. The twisted rictus of her death face would haunt Ben for the rest of his life, however long that ended up being. A dark, vaguely human-shaped shadow floated in